Anatahan Island, located about 177 kilometers north of Saipan Island, is a small island in the Mariana Islands of the Pacific Ocean. During World War II, a group of 32 Japanese men and one woman became stranded on this island, armed with 2 guns and accompanied by the only woman among them. They endured 6 harrowing years filled with irrational and tragic events, leading to numerous deaths. By the end, only 19 men and the woman survived. So, what really happened on this desolate island? You are following the story, The Massacre on Annata Han Island, the tale of a solitary woman living on a deserted island with 32 men. On the Decoder Box channel. As usual, before diving into the main content, don't forget to hit like and subscribe to encourage us and to stay updated on the latest thrilling and captivating cases. Annata Han Island, where tragedy began. In 1939, encouraged by domestic policies, many Japanese citizens migrated to islands occupied by Japan to work and settle. Among them was Kyuko Higa, a 16-year-old girl from Okinawa, who, along with her brother, came to Saipan Island in hopes of finding refuge and starting a new life. Shortly after her arrival, she found a job at a lively cafe, quickly capturing the attention of many young men. Among Kyuko Higa's admirers was a young man from Okinawa named Soichi Higa. He pursued her persistently and was fortunate enough to win her heart. After dating for a while, Kazuko, Kyuko Higa's affectionate nickname, turned 18, and they got married. However, life in Japan became increasingly crowded, and the government began promoting a migration policy to the Pacific Islands. Soichi's job involved supervising some workers on these islands. At that time, Kazuko's married life was peaceful and happy. In 1944, Soichi's job changed, and he was transferred to Anatahan Island, a small island in the Mariana Islands in the Pacific Ocean. Soichi took Kazuko along with him, along with his employer, Mr. Kikuichiro, who was responsible for managing the plantations on the island. Anatahan is an oval-shaped island with an area of about 32 square kilometers, featuring a volcano and once thriving coconut plantations that had been ravaged by storms. Here, Soichi managed around 20 native workers. In the beginning, Kazuko's life on the island was relatively peaceful, but soon after, World War II was drawing to a close, and Japan began to lose ground in the Pacific theater. The islands previously under Japanese control gradually fell to American forces. At this time, Soichi grew worried for his sister on a nearby island and decided to leave Anatahan to visit her. No one expected that this would be the last time Kazuko would see her husband, as he left and never returned. As the war continued, only a few people remained on Anatahan, including Kazuko and her employer, Kikuichiro. Under the pressure of the circumstances, the two gradually grew close and eventually began living together as a couple. But their peace was short-lived. Soon after, American forces bombed Anatahan Island. Kazuko and Kikuichiro hid in the dense jungle and managed to survive, though the plantations and essential supplies were destroyed. The arrival of 31 new people. The battle begins with 2 guns. Anatahan Island became completely isolated. Nevertheless, they still had 40 pigs and 20 chickens, enough to sustain life for a while. However, the existence of just the 2 on the island was not to last. On June 12, 1944, American forces attacked 4 fishing boats near the island. 3 of the boats sank, and the remaining boat was heavily damaged. The sailors tried to swim to the island, and eventually, 31 people survived, including 10 Japanese Navy soldiers and 21 young sailors who managed to reach Anatahan Island. With no boat, they could only survive by relying on wild bananas and coconuts to stave off hunger. Initially, the 31 survivors who arrived on Anatahan thought it was a deserted island, cut off from the outside world. But one day, while picking wild fruits, they unexpectedly encountered Kazuko and Kikuichiro. Having lived in solitude for so long, the two were overjoyed to see more Japanese people, as if reuniting with compatriots in a desolate land. The couple not only shared food, but also helped treat the wounds of the newcomers. At first, the survivors formed small groups, but over time, they became united, living together, including Kazuko and Kikuichiro. With the increased population, they quickly consumed all the pigs and chickens, leaving only wild fruits, crabs, and seafood. They learned to fish on their own and even made coconut wine in an effort to sustain life on the island. Time passed, and they lived peacefully for more than a year. On August 15, 1945, Japan announced its surrender in World War II, but the people on the island remained unaware. When American forces came to announce the news, the islanders believed it to be a trick and refused to leave. The native islanders departed, leaving only 33 Japanese. Isolated on Anatahan, peace on the island began to shift. The gender imbalance created tension, and most of the men directed their attention towards Kazuko. To avoid disorder, some suggested that Kazuko and Kikuichiro hold a wedding ceremony, publicly solidifying their bond to prevent any undue interest. This solution proved effective, and life returned to a state of calm. However, the peace lasted only until August 1946, when they discovered the wreckage of an American bomber on the island, containing various supplies, parachutes, and 4 guns, 2 of which were reparable. The presence of guns changed the balance of power, with authority shifting to those who held weapons, namely the 2 who repaired the guns, known as Yamamoto and Yamaguchi. Now, those with guns held power, and equality on the island disappeared. With control in their hands, they began to dominate everything, including Kazuko. Under pressure, Kazuko could only silently endure, helpless against the oppressive rule. The only woman and the center of all events. Life on Anatahan Island was far from the peaceful appearance it presented. Not long after everyone settled, the first death occurred. A man fell from a coconut tree and died. Yamamoto and Yamaguchi, the only 2 with guns on the island, were also the only witnesses to the incident. Since this man had previously clashed with Yamamoto, suspicions arose that his death might not have been an accident. This doubt spread, leaving those without guns feeling increasingly uneasy. But Yamamoto was unconcerned, becoming more arrogant. When another man tried to approach Kazuko, he was shot, further spreading panic among the people. The atmosphere on the island grew tense and filled with anxiety, especially for Kazuko's husband, Kikuichiro, constantly monitored. He feared that a single wrong move could end his life. In this situation, Kikuichiro devised a plan. He pretended to distance himself from Kazuko, suggesting that he would relinquish her to Yamamoto and Yamaguchi, leading both men to believe they could have Kazuko to themselves. However, Kazuko realized that both wanting to possess her would only spark conflict between them. And indeed, not long after, Yamamoto and Yamaguchi began vying for Kazuko. Ultimately, after a fierce confrontation, Yamaguchi emerged victorious, becoming the sole possessor of both Kazuko and the 2 guns, holding absolute power on the island. Yamaguchi enjoyed his emperor status, but shortly thereafter, he unexpectedly died, rumored to have fallen into the sea and drowned. However, it was widely understood that his death was no accident. Yamaguchi's 2 guns quickly fell into the hands of 2 new men, Nakazawa and Iwai, who continued to force Kazuko into submission. Only a little over a month passed peacefully before tensions flared again between Nakazawa and Iwai. After another conflict, Iwai emerged victorious, securing both guns and Kazuko. Unlike his predecessors, Iwai learned from past events. He lived cautiously, careful not to expose any weaknesses, fearing assassination. This way, Iwai maintained control for 2 years. But ultimately, fate was unrelenting. 2 years later, Iwai was also assassinated, and Anatahan Island once again sank into a fog of death. The plan to deal with Kazuko and the unexpected rescue. As the deaths on Annata Han Island continued, the remaining members of the small community grew increasingly impatient. After 3 more people died under suspicious accidents, only 19 survivors remained. The islanders gathered to discuss and concluded that the 2 guns were the main cause of the unrest. They proposed a plan. Kazuko would choose someone to marry, and then the guns would be thrown into the sea. This way, power would no longer be dictated by weapons, and Kazuko would cease to be an object of contention. Though the plan sounded reasonable, it was not as simple in practice, even after the guns were thrown away. For more people mysteriously died or disappeared. This unsettling pattern prompted another meeting. This time, they reached a bold conclusion. The cause of the tragedy was not only the power of the guns, but also the greed associated with Kazuko. They decided that dealing with Kazuko might end the disputes and restore peace to the island. The plan was set for the next morning, but that night, a man who harbored deep feelings for Kazuko warned her of the plot. Terrified, Kazuko fled into the jungle, hiding and surviving in a ravine, with nearly 32 square kilometers of dense forest. Finding her proved to be no easy task. After 33 days of hiding, Kazuko spotted an American warship anchored near the shore. She climbed a tree, waving and shouting to attract the attention of the American soldiers, who ultimately rescued her from the grim island. Public outcry, Kazuko's reputation and fate. After returning to Japan, Kazuko informed the families of the men still on the island about their condition. To convince those who refused to leave the island that the war had ended, their families wrote over 200 letters addressed to the island. However, most of the men still insisted it was a trick by the American military. Finally, on June 26, 1951, one man recognized the distinctive handwriting of his wife's letter. He eventually persuaded everyone to accept that the war was indeed over, and they had lost. When the remaining survivors were rescued from Anatahan Island, they returned to Japan after years of being presumed missing. Many had been thought to have perished in battle, and their families had moved on with their lives. Some wives had remarried, including Kazuko's former husband, Soichi Higa, who had found new happiness. However, upon their return, the survivors faced probing questions from the media about the fate of the 13 men who never returned. Inconsistent accounts gradually unveiled suspicions, and under public pressure, the dark truth of the murders and the fierce struggles over Kazuko slowly came to light. The story became the center of attention in Japanese society, making Kazuko famous, with the media bestowing various nicknames upon her, such as the Queen of Anatahan Island, the Queen Bee, and the Woman with 32 Faces. While some media sympathized with her difficult situation, the majority of the public criticized her, blaming her for the tragedies on the island. In 1952, Kazuko was invited to star in the play Anatahan Island, touring across Japan. In 1953, her story was adapted into the film The Truth About Anatahan Island, in which she played herself. However, Kazuko's acting career was short-lived, and she sought other means of livelihood, eventually working as a dancer in Tokyo. At 34, she remarried and, with her husband, opened a small shop, hoping for a simple life. But happiness was fleeting. Her husband passed away when she was in her 40s, and in 1974, Kazuko succumbed to a brain tumor at the age of 50, closing the chapter on her tumultuous life. Instinct for survival and the lessons behind the tragedy. The Anatahan Island incident was not only a personal tragedy, but also a reflection of deep issues within human society. When isolated from the constraints of law, people easily revert to primal instincts, clashing for power and survival. Weapons or a single woman were not the sole causes, but rather human greed and the inability to withstand trials. The guns and Kazuko's allure were merely catalysts, igniting the fierce competition and deep desires within them, creating an unforgettable tragic tale. After the survivors returned from Anatahan Island, Kazuko faced harsh criticism and condemnation. Some accused her of bringing death and horror, with even threats against her life. But did anyone question whether, had they been able to control their desires and instincts, the outcome would have been different? Kazuko was, in truth, a fragile woman, subjected to violence and tremendous pressure. In her circumstances, she had little choice but to accept and endure. Speculation arose, questioning why she did not conceive after years on the island. Some theories suggested she may have suffered a miscarriage, resulting in infertility. However, no explanation was confirmed, leaving Kazuko to face a harsh world upon her return. Japanese public opinion remained largely critical, and the media consistently portrayed her in a negative light. In such conditions, survival left her with few choices. Kazuko's story serves as a reminder of human nature and the necessity of laws and social standards, not only to protect the vulnerable, but to maintain balance and safety for all. So, what are your thoughts on Kazuko's story? Does she deserve such a harsh judgment? Leave a comment and share your thoughts with us. Don't forget to like, subscribe to the channel, and turn on notifications to stay updated on the most classic cases.